Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Backstage Bikini podcast with your host, Grace and Jade. So, for today's episode, we are very excited to have Miss Hannah Wares on the podcast, or should I say, CEO of the Pocket Rocket podcast. I have to say, I was so nervous messaging her to come on. I was like, oh God, is she going to think that we're like enemies?
No, not at all.
Was there going to be a little bit of crossover? But if nobody knows who you are, Hannah, I'm sure they do, if they haven't listened to the podcast, but tell everybody who you are, how you got started into the industry, how you fell into bikini, all that jazz.
Okay, so I basically just wanted to start a diet back in 2018. I'd trained for years, but I'd never dieted down dramatically. And I was just like, fuck it, let's just see how lean I can get. And I started dieting in the January, and it kind of just rolled on and on and on because it was back then. People didn't really do photo shoots. And then my coach at the time said to me, why don't you just have an end goal, book a shoot? So I did. And on the day of the shoot, it was in August, he said to me, there's a show in 3 weeks. Do you want to do it? And I was like, I am not a bikini girl. Are you mad? He was like, just give it a go. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're lean anyway. And I did the show, and that was a UK BFF show back in the day. And I won, and I got an invite to the British finals. So off I went, and I got 6th place there. And I was like, hang about, I might actually be all right at this. And back then it was top 6 at a British final. So I was like, I placed in 2 shows. And I just got the bug. From the moment I stepped on stage, I just got the bug. And I've done 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, took 2022 off. And now I'm back in 2023, this time under Ross's guidance, which is very exciting.
It is very exciting. Very exciting prep. Lots of tissue has been built, although I think you would say something different right now, but we'll get into the thick of everything. And I think you have so much experience, Hannah, when it comes to competing. So it was a no-brainer getting you on, especially as an amateur on prep. And we actually had somebody reach out to us on YouTube with a particular question with regards to, I suppose, getting somebody on who's on prep and is going through all of it right now. And I think for you, Hannah, as well, what was great about you is you share a lot of the struggles, and I don't think you hide it. And I think that comes with the experience as well. And you share a lot on your podcast. So if you guys haven't already listened, I would definitely recommend you go listen to it as well. But we'll kind of just get into the nitty and gritty of it all. And as everybody likes to say, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'd like to think that with this podcast, we do touch on a lot of the things, but I suppose just more specifically with yourself on prep and having the experience that you do behind you, we just want to hear it all. So I suppose it's like, where do we start when it comes to things? It's like, when I think of the harsh realities of a prep, and people are like, oh God, I don't even know where to start. And it's never, I don't want people to think that, I suppose we think badly of the sport, but I think it just comes down to educating and making sure that the right people go into it for the right reasons.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always treading that thin line between being honest and then sounding like I'm complaining about it. And I always try and make it really, really clear. Like I said to my mum the other week, I was like, oh God, I feel like shit. And she was like, oh no. And I was like, no, don't say, oh no. I do feel like shit. It's fact I feel like shit. But if I didn't feel like shit, it probably wouldn't be working. So let's celebrate that. And she was like, okay, good. And now since then I said to her, she texted me earlier and was like, you're right. And I was like, just about. And she was like, good stuff.
Yeah.
You've just got to have that understanding that, some days you're going to feel fine. You might be 2 weeks out and actually feel fine, but there might be other days when you don't. And that's all part and parcel of it. And as Phoebe says, prep is a privilege, and just reminding yourself that you are in a very privileged position to be able to do it.
Yeah, I think it's finding that balance, isn't it, between saying this is a privilege, but I'm allowed to struggle. I'm allowed to be emotional. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've cried on a prep before, and it makes you question then, oh God, am I cut out for this? Am I weak? But no, you're just human going through all of these things. And if you shut it off we speak about it before, there's going to be repercussions down the line if you just kind of, and like prep for a lot of people is like, I suppose it is like a control element and you're able to like shut off a lot of things, but you'll have to allow yourself feel when you need to feel. You know, I know Jade, you're a big advocate of that as well.
I was the queen in that first season that I ever did. I was, well, even the second one actually. In the first 2 seasons I ever did, I just shut everything down. And it is, like you say, it's the easiest thing in the world to just switch off and have that one sole focus. And yes, the world moves and life moves alongside it. But I think, especially you, Hannah, I think it's difficult, or it was difficult for me to actually accept those feelings, because it was very much a nobody gives a shit, keep working, like kind of attitude. And I do feel like that's still out there. But then, like you said, there's a responsibility for you to yourself, to owe yourself that room to actually feel things and be sincere and be genuine and be present. And that's something that I took ages to learn, but I've always observed it with you, like even in the off season as well. I know we're touching specifically on prep, but even in the off season, you are open. And not to the point where you're just like, oh, woe is me. This life is so hard. Do you know what I mean? You're transparent and you can tell that you're very present with things. Is there anything in particular that you'd say you struggle with the most, or has it changed like over the years?
Very much changed over the years. And I think this is something that comes up quite a lot with new competitors. They're like, oh, what's it going to feel like? What are the problems you're going to have? Like when you're new to it, the food focus is outrageous. Like all you can think about is how hungry you are. All you can think about is your next meal and what you're going to have post show. And you're watching people on social media and YouTube eating things, which is weird, but we've all done it. And now I was having this conversation with someone earlier on. I don't actually have any cravings anymore. In my last prep, I didn't really have any cravings. I love fajitas. So post-show, I always want to eat fajitas. But I think that's more about because your taste buds develop through a prep. And it's almost like, I always say, like detoxing them. So when you take all of the flavorful foods away, all of your colorful vegetables, that's what I crave now that I'm like further into it. So I just want more of the food that I'm eating. I'm not actually fussed about food. And now for me, the thing that I struggle with is, especially after having had a year and a half in an off season, is I feel small and I feel weak. And I'm like, why are you even here? Like this training session's a bag of shit. Your shit. Why are you even bothering right now?
It's so difficult.
And that's what I struggle with. I struggle with the fact that I'm like a little bit like an imposter. Like I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm just this small girl. And then on top of that, just tiredness. Like I'm always tired. But the hunger side of things, I can be super hungry and I don't really care that much. But I did when I first started. I couldn't think of anything other than food all day, every day.
That's crazy. I think that's crazy because I'm the complete opposite. I found that my food focus has increased every prep. And I think that's because when I first started, I wasn't as lean. And my food has gotten, people always say the preps get easier, as in like you have more muscle, so you can get away with more. Not the case. It has been the complete other direction. Like I've had to push way more with cardio and way lower with food each of my preps. And with that, my food focus has got so much higher. Like this prep just gone, I don't know what it was, but I was nonstop thinking. And it didn't help that I went to Texas, like literally America, at 5 weeks out, and Ross had just finished a show, so he was eating all the Chick-fil-A, and I was like, what am I doing to myself? Because I thought that I could do it. My first prep was fine. But it's interesting you say that, like that. Do you feel like your food, I suppose food focus has decreased, but have you found like your relationship with food has improved, I suppose, as the years have gone on, and how you've handled post shows as well?
Yeah, massively. I mean, even prior to all of this weird little world that we're in now, I always loved my food, and it didn't need to be good food or bad food. It could be anything. It could be a roast dinner, and I was piling it on because I love food, but it could also be that I'd go to the chippy and have a large portion of chips and a large piece of fish, and I would still quite happily have a dessert. And I was never really fat. I was just always a bit chunky. And And then post show for the first two, I was an arsehole. Like, I didn't have any guidance. I didn't know what I was doing. My coach at the time didn't say to me, like, be mindful, here's a meal plan. He was just like, okay, well, like, yeah, just let me know when you're ready. And I was like, okay. And I just ate everything. It was a little bit of, I wanted the food, but it was also like, as we know, the leptin and the ghrelin post show is like, it's like nothing you can describe to anyone. It's more than like you're hungry. It's insatiable, and nothing will ever satiate you. So what I've learned as I've gone on, and I actually nailed my last post show. The one before that, it was a bit hit and miss, but it was a lot better. But my last one, I absolutely nailed it. And it was just telling myself, you're going to be hungry, get over it. I just didn't treat it like it was the end of a prep. I just pretended I had another show. And that was so much easier on my mindset, because I was like, well, you just got to carry on. But yeah, the food post show I found a lot easier as I've been doing it longer. Not to say that this time it will be the same, because every prep is different, but I'd like to think that I've got a handle on it now, and I can kind of get hold of it.
I was exactly like that. Like my first prep, especially, I was that person who sat and watched Great British Bake Off. Yeah. Every single day. I even watched it when I was doing my cardio. And then I used to have a yogurt meal at the end of the day. It was yogurt and dark chocolate. And I used to shove a 10-calorie jelly in there, because my first coach didn't give a crap about them. Didn't give a crap about much, but well, hey. And I used to sit there, and I used to, honestly, it lasted 50 minutes. The entire program, it lasted 50 minutes, and I made it last. But then the food focus after that, because I'd spent 20 plus weeks, so I think it was 16 for my first prep, watching cake. So all I wanted was cake. And I had to come off Instagram at one point, because I was liking that many food profiles at the time that I didn't see any of my family, my friends, any other competitors. All I saw was cookies. I think that in itself is it can set you up for a gigantic fall at the end of a prep. And I think it's very easy to do it, because like you say, Hannah, that food focus and that hunger is just, you've never felt anything like it. You've never had the fatigue like it. And that first exposure to it is rough. Like, I don't think there's any sugarcoating that.
No.
But what would you tell yourself, like, now? What would you, if you were talking to Hannah in that first 2018 season, what would you tell yourself?
Literally what I do tell my friends that are new to it. I always say to them, because I've had some really bad experiences post show with food. I mean, I've made myself very unwell. And the thing that I always say, and it does stick with me and it works now, is remember how bad you felt eating that food. Not guilt-wise, fuck the guilt, because that will pass and you'll forget the guilt. But physically, how sick you felt, how much your stomach hurt from like being so bloated, the night sweats that you'll inevitably have. Like, remember all of those things. And some people get like migraines because they're not used to having the sugar. You'll get the shits if you're not used to having the dairy, which none of us are during a prep. I remember
Heartburn. That is awful for me. And like, I don't find myself like overeating a massive amount, but I think it's just having more than usual. The heartburn is just painful, and I can't train it because the heartburn is so bad.
Yeah. I just think if you can remember, and even if it takes you writing a note in your phone to be like, literally write down how you feel in that moment, and just try and remember that, because it's kind of a form of self-harm, right? If you remember how bad you felt, and then you're willing to go do that again, knowing that you're going to feel that bad again. It's so difficult, but you do have to try and remember that. And like, if you're ever like thinking, oh, I'm going to eat something, call someone or go for a walk. And if you're going for a walk, don't walk to a shop, because that's just asking for trouble. Like, yeah, we've all done it. We've all done it. I'm going for a walk, and then you walk past a newsagent's and you come out with 3 chocolate bars.
Reese's Pieces, 4 packs.
No, stop. I actually did that. I think I was like 4 or 5 days show, and I was back tracking calories, and I remember I went on a walk without Ross, obviously, because you have to be and I really wanted like this flapjack thing, and I was just like walking back, and it wasn't even like that much, but I was like, I felt so free with food. So you're like, course I'm just going to go. I'd never dream of doing that now. Like, you know, the kind of way, and especially like eating on your own, but it was just like, nobody can watch me, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Snacking was my absolute downfall. Because in my head, because it wasn't a meal, it must be fine. Do you know the kind of way? It's just a snack. But no, I completely overdone the snack. But it's funny you say that. We've never actually touched on, I suppose, this kind of thing on the podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able
It's like eating
to
on your
relate.
own, like
Yes.
you can see me, there's no shame. But you will know. And another tool that I did with one of my friends last year, or the last season they competed, was I was like, in a bit of paper in front of you, don't do it on your phone because you won't see it on your phone, but a bit of paper in front of you, every time you eat something, write it down. Yeah, because if you have to write it down and you start seeing that list build up, you'll stop because you'll feel like, shit, I've eaten quite a lot. And I think when people have been on a meal plan, it's also harder because you don't actually understand the value of the plate that's on the food, because you've just been eating 100 grams of potato, for example. You don't know how much carb that actually is. So then someone will go, oh, I've had potato for the last 6 months. It's only a jacket potato in a restaurant. And you're like, it's not the same.
It's like 250 grams. Yeah.
It's like people don't understand. They go out for a steak and they go, I've had steak in my meal plan for however long. Yeah, but you're going out for a steak. You're not actually then tracking the oil. You're not guesstimating the oil. You don't know how much it weighs. You don't know if they've marinated it in things. So I think macro tracking has helped me as well, because now I understand the value of what's in front of me. So if I want to swap something out, whether that's off season or prep, I have a better understanding of, well, it's not just a couple of rice cakes. They're chocolate rice cakes, they're Snacker Jacks, they're 78 calories a pop or something like that. There's a ton of fat as well as the carb. I could just have a bagel thin and I'm probably better off.
And would you say like because that this person in particular asked about, I suppose, your current diet, like over the years, like you said, have you done a meal plan before, and are you tracking now? Do you find it, I know you touched briefly on it on your podcast, but do you find it's helping with those kind of cravings as well?
Yeah, massively. I think the main thing that I struggled with, so I did a meal plan off season and prep for like 4 years. So I didn't ever really veer off. So if I did veer off, it was because I was kind of going nuts off my plan. But the thing that I really struggled with was like a meal would be coming up and I'm like, I just don't want to eat this. And it wasn't because I wasn't hungry. I was just like, I'm so sick of this meal. And so now, for example, I had turkey today instead of chicken. But because I have that choice, I'm allowed to, and I'm able to make that choice. It doesn't feel restrictive. I personally think if you are a competitor that's been doing it a long time and you understand it, and that you tracked through an off season, then I think you could probably take that into a prep. I think it's dangerous for someone who's new to the sport to track, because when I say track, people talk about like, oh, if it fits your macros. I'm not doing if it fits your macros. I eat the same things at the same times every day and did throughout my off season. Now through a prep, it's exactly the same meals. But like I say, if I want to have prawns or chicken or turkey bacon, I can switch those things out. You know, like I'm not switching it out to have a protein bar, or like I wouldn't switch it out and have beef mince because I never ever eat beef mince. Yeah. So it's just trying to keep the same sources, but allowing that choice that works really well for me.
Yeah. And I think from a mindset point of view as well, like I've always had meal plans, always. And I think from any deviance from a plan always feels a little bit like you're doing something that you shouldn't be. So I think having that flexibility, obviously, like you say, it's so important. And if you're a first timer and you have never done this before and you haven't got the awareness, like what you're talking about, Hannah, you're talking about specific macros per meal, so that any swaps that you will be doing will be like for like, just different values in terms of, well, different textures, different tastes, this, that, and the other, different sources, but the macros will be identical. And I think it's a little bit, obviously, if you're new to the sport and things like that, it's important that you have that skill set before you even try. But in terms of macro tracking, like that's something I've never done. And do you know, hand on heart, there's an element of me that like still gets quite nervous about it. I'm managing my own meal plan now in an off season and in a diet, and I still have a meal plan for myself. And it's interesting that freedom can also come with so much anxiety. Have you ever had that, or has it been a gradual thing?
I definitely did post show last year. So I did a very, very slow reverse. Like 10 grams of carbs extra a day maybe, or 20 grams every few days, something like that, depending on what my weight was doing. And I stayed lean for a long time. And there was different reasons for that. Like I felt like, because of the people that were around me, that nailing my post show meant that my food got really high and that my body fat stayed really low. So in theory, on paper, I nailed that, but I was also very, very lean for a long time. And what that did do was it created a little bit of, I probably would have got over that tension and that anxiety a little bit quicker if I'd put on weight quicker, because when I would go out for an off-plan meal, and I was having them like once a month, because I was like, no, I need to nail this. And nailing it to me meant no off plans. So I was like going for sushi once a month. But then because it was once a month, I found it quite hard the first few times that I had an off-plan meal to know when I was full. And the first one that I had, after, it was about 2 months post show, I had like an off plan, and I had sushi, and then I went home and I had a cookie dealer in the freezer, and I was like, I can eat the cookie dealer. And I gained 2 kilos, and I was like, oh my God. And I felt like I'd failed because everyone else has a Domino's pizza and then they have a cookie dealer and it's normal. So I was like, well, I should be able to do that. But then that created a little bit of anxiety for me, that then the next time I went for an off plan, I literally had 20 sushi rolls and I was done. And I was like, okay. And it meant that I didn't have that uncomfortable, I'm super full, I feel sick feeling. I was unwell. But it also just meant that for a long time, I then struggled a little bit with letting go and having the off-plan meal. So much so that when I joined Ross, he was like, so yeah, like 2 off-plan meals a week. And I was like, whoa. Let's calm down. Let's maybe start with 1 every couple of weeks if we need it. And he was like, no, like enjoy it. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I can. And he's actually taught me a lot about having that social time and it being okay. And it's not a bad thing. And actually what I've realized was, because I wasn't being an asshole and overeating, I didn't gain loads of weight and it was absolutely fine.
Yeah. And you're a massive foodie, Hannah, as well, aren't you? Like you've got your food page, and that's why I always find it like mad. Like it's the people who are the massive foodies are able to like control, I suppose, their off plans. I'm like, you have a page to run. Come on.
Get the good stuff.
It's the same with Holly Davidge. I'm like, come on, you're making a business out of this. Keep eating.
My page is literally just sushi, pretty much the whole thing. But yeah, no, I really love my food. And I guess that's another weird thing. I don't know if you two are like this, that I get a huge amount of enjoyment out of watching people eat. And I'm not just talking about on YouTube and that, but like if I know, say I was coming to see one of yous and I knew you liked something, I'd be like, oh, I need to get that for them. And then when you ate it, I'd be sitting there like, how good is it though? And I get so much from that. And it's weird, but I was like that before bodybuilding. I've always liked baking and cooking. I've always been a bit of a feeder. So I think it all just rolls in. So in a prep, I do like to cook and bake. And I used to struggle sitting around people eating, but now I just sit there and I'm like, wow, they're having the best time. And it's okay. But at the beginning, I found it quite hard.
Yeah. I particularly on prep, for me, it's the social element of the food more than the food itself. And I, especially with like lockdown, didn't get like, you know, any socializing through that year. Then I started prep, and then I was living in Manchester and I was like, I have to go to every single restaurant in Manchester. When I went home, I wanted to go for food like every single night with my family because I hadn't seen them and all that kind of thing. And I always say it's like paying back that social debt. But when you're on prep, Hannah, when it comes to like your relationships and stuff, you were at a rave the other night, so we can kind of touch on that. But like, do you find that like your social, you keep your social like life in for as long as you can, or do you find that your relationships do kind of suffer, especially towards that like tail end and stuff? How do you find that?
So I did go to Printworks the other night.
Woo, Hannah, it was so mint.
It was good. But at the same time, like I said to Ross, look, Printworks is closing down. That's where I want to go because I'm not going to be able to go again. And I said to him, I promise you, this is the last social thing. And what I meant by that was, that's the last time I'm going to have a late night or I'm going to be on my feet for longer than I should be, or I'm going to mess up my meal times because you can't take food into Printworks, for example. And I will be very selective over what I do socially. So I'm going out with my mum and my auntie tomorrow. They're having lunch. They went, come. Like, that's not a problem to me. I'll sit there and I'll have the black coffee. In my first prep, that would have been a no-go, because I would have really struggled to then, and it would have put me in a bad mood. And I think that's what people need to remember, is that it's your choice, and you're not allowed to be an arsehole to people because you're hungry or you're tired. And it's really hard in your first couple of years of doing this to realize you're being an arsehole. But as long as you've got the right people around you that will tell you you're being it and you can accept that, I think that's good. But yeah, I kind of like, I'll allow certain things. And I'm very fortunate that a lot of my good friends are in this sport anyway. So they will suggest things to me. Like, one of my friends said to me the other day, come round to mine for a coffee at the weekend, we'll go for a walk. So, you know, those sorts of things. If you want to go to the cinema, go to the cinema. But if you're going to go to the cinema, make sure you've got all your steps done way before, because otherwise you're going to be sitting in the cinema thinking, I'm sitting down and I need to be walking around right now. But yeah, like, I don't tend to stay out because it messes with my routine. I might have one bad night's sleep. So at this point that I'm at in prep right now, the most I'll be doing is going out for a few hours to do something with someone. I probably wouldn't go anywhere that I'd need to take more than a meal, because I don't want to be out for that long. And I do tend to go into a little bit of a prep hole, a little cave, and I'm like, right, focus now. Because if I turn up on stage and I don't get my placing, or someone does better than me, and I wanted to do better than them, no one in particular, but, you know, kind of, if you're up in a lineup, and I don't get that placing, I will blame myself because I didn't put my all in.
Yeah. I mean, I did okay, you know, with that first prep with socializing. I remember going out for my friend's birthday and I was out till 3 a.m. in the morning. Absolutely fine. I had coffee, black coffee, I had Diet Cokes and things like that. But now the understanding further down the line, the impact on the fatigue, like you say, and the impact on your sleep that has later down the line. And that must have been about 7 weeks out. It was a little bit too close, like far too close.
Yeah.
But managed it and didn't think anything of it. And I think with experience as well, and especially with the amount of exposure people have now coming into the industry in their first season, the amount of conversations that are being had on like your podcast and YouTube and things like that, the more you immerse yourself, the more you can understand the impact of those and make sort of sound choices. Do you find, or did you find, Hannah, like sort of coming into this sport around your relationships? I know you have a normal job, in air quotes, and I found it particularly difficult. I think one of my colleagues asked me whether I probably shouldn't say this word, ket in a bag. It was protein powder, but they asked me whether it was drugs. So did you have difficulties with your relationships in terms of trying to get people to understand what the hell you were doing, and how did that impact you? How has that changed, and what did you do about it at the time?
I've had several different jobs whilst I've been competing, and each one has come with its own struggles. They've all been office jobs, so I work in IT, and there's always been that weird, what are you doing? Like, you look ill, are you all right? Like, or worse than being told you look ill is I've started a couple of jobs when I've been like in the middle of shows, and then I've post-show gained weight, and then they start going to you, God, you've put on a lot of weight, and trying to explain to someone that I weighed like 7 stone and that's not normal, and that's not what I look like all the time. This is what I look like all the time. That's quite difficult. I actually have been asked outright in an open plan office by an old CEO if I am on steroids. So I was
Lovely.
like, thanks for asking that question in front of everyone in here. And then when I said to him, not really supposed to ask people that, he was like, why? Okay. So yeah, there's been some weird different people that I've worked with over the years. I think there's the standard thing of the Tupperware question. People make jokes and they don't realize that you've probably had that joke hundreds of times of, oh, you got your lunchbox? Yes, I have my lunchbox.
Mhm.
But now I work for a company who are incredibly understanding and really, really supportive. And I work from home, which makes my life so much easier. But yeah, I think the best way to deal with it is to try and politely educate people. So if they say something that makes you uncomfortable, find a way to tell them that that question has made you feel uncomfortable without coming across as aggressive or arsey. Because if you are hungry and you're tired, that will come so much easier. So if someone says to you something like, "Cool, you're bloody thin," you can just say to them like, "That's the purpose. Yeah, I'm supposed to be thin right now. But just so you know, like, I'd rather you didn't comment on my appearance if that's okay." Like there are ways to do it. And if they were to kind of rebut that, you could just say, "Well, if I was overweight, you probably wouldn't comment on that." So I think it's just better that we're just transparent about these things. And it depends obviously who you're working with, but as long as you tone it in the right way, that's fine. And sometimes address it with your line manager. Like I told my line manager before I was starting this prep now that I was starting it. And I think there's a lot of respect will come your way in an office environment if you're just honest about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And the other thing is tell people that you love it. Like if you say you love something and you really enjoy it, then they're so much more inclined to support it than if you hide it and pretend like it's not happening, because then it seems secretive and then people will want to know. Whereas if you're just open, then they won't ask lots of questions because there's no secret to be known, you know?
Yeah.
I do. I need to take a leaf out of your book, because I definitely haven't been like that in the past. I take it very much to heart. I always feel like they're judging me or something. And I think when it comes that does come from maybe family not understanding it as well. Do you find with your family in particular that do they pass comments similarly, or are they super supportive to the point that they come and support you at your shows and they're like cheering you on?
I have the most incredible parents that I couldn't ask for better parents. In my first year, they didn't get it, and they just kept on going, "You're obsessed, you're obsessed." And I was like, "I'm not obsessed, like I'm just enjoying something." And then when they saw that I enjoyed it and they heard that I won, my family are very competitive. So if you win, they're like, we're backing you the whole way.
Yeah.
But yeah, my parents are crazy supportive. They have been to a show when I allow them to, because I get super nervous. But no one else in my family really gets it. I have aunties that will tell me I look fantastic, lovely, and all that sort of thing. But most of them is, "Are you still doing that? Like, why are you dieting again? What do you mean you can't have cake? Well, you can just have one chip." And it's more about just like, as long as you tell them that you love it, as I say, and you've got that inside of you, that doesn't matter what someone's going to say. When they say to you, "Are you doing that again?" "Yeah, I am, because I enjoy it. Can we move on from this, please?"
3 years later,
Yeah.
you're still asking the same question.
Yeah.
You know what used to really work for me as well? I just used to say, "I don't want it."
Yes. Yeah.
They don't have anything for that. So I found that the more I tried to justify my actions or justify my choices or defend my choices, defensive side of things, like you've touched on already, the way you communicate things, if you hit on the defensive, like you are like backed into a corner and you're a little tiny dog yapping, like, "Get away from my thing," then that doesn't come off well at all. And people find a hole in that. Whereas if someone asks you, "Oh, do you want one of these?" or "Why aren't you having one of those?" I was like, "Oh, I don't want one. I've just ate."
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, but it was pasta or it was rice and chicken. I was like, "Yeah, but I'm full."
Yeah.
And it could be a barefaced lie, but in that moment, it just takes the impetus off somebody picking at your choices and making you feel vulnerable for doing those things, when actually you're pretty secure in those decisions at the time. You'd have to be to do a prep, right?
Yeah. I think, like you say, if it's someone that knows you, then you've just got to say, "I don't want one, thank you." And the best one is if they don't know you. "I'm allergic." Are you? Yeah, I'm allergic. I'm so deathly allergic. You can't even come near me. And they're like,
my God.
oh my God, no, that's awful. And you go, it is, isn't it?
And
And
then a
they
few
won't
months
say it
later, they
again.
see it stuck in your face without everything.
And then you look at them and go, I lied.
Actually,
Yeah, I've got an allergy test. It says I'm absolutely fine.
You're allergic to chocolate. Yeah, I hate it. Oh, horrible, horrible stuff. But yeah, I
That's
think, like you say,
brilliant.
Jade, like just try that. I actually don't want it, thank you.
Mm.
Or if you've got a good relationship with someone, when people go to you, oh, I don't know how you do it. The motivation. I always look them dead in the eye, and I don't care who it is, and I'll just go to them. Do you know what my motivation is? I'm going to have to stand practically half naked. I'm going to be in my pants, a thong,
Yeah.
and a sparkly bra in front of hundreds of people, and everyone's going to know about it. So if I eat that biscuit right now,
You're
then
gonna see it.
everyone's going to see it, and I'm going to be ashamed of myself. So that's why I'm not going to eat it. And they're like, oh, okay.
I've
Sometimes
had that
it's a shell
conversation with
shock.
myself. Yeah.
Literally.
How do you
Is
find
it-
the brain fog, Hannah? Sorry, Grace. Do you get brain fog
Yeah,
in
sometimes.
work?
Yeah, it can be quite difficult. You just do stupid shit, and you'll just say to them, I don't really know why I did that, sorry. You just got to be honest. But like, again, this kind of comes back to you saying about social stuff. It's trying to do, like, quite openly, I said this to my line manager the other week. I was like, it will get to a point, probably not too far from now, where I'll do nothing at the weekends because I'll just want to catch up on sleep so that I'm clear for work again. And I don't care about being lonely or anything at home. It's temporary. What's important to me is my prep and my job. So yeah, I do get a bit of brain fog. Towards the end of a prep, I put like sticky post-it notes all over my walls and all over my desk. And it looks a bit manic if someone comes around. They're like, why have you stuck all those on the wall? But I can peel them off as I do things and I know I've done them. So yeah, there's like lists everywhere. But yeah, I think we all suffer with brain fog a little bit, don't we?
Yeah, you just have to be super, super on the ball. Everything. Like I worked my first prep. I worked a 9 to 5 in a corporate office, but I was front of house. So all of these corporates, a big sales force. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was a big corporate thing in Dublin, and thousands of employees I would see every day. And I was the first thing. I had to wear heels and tights and skirts and dresses, and it got to that point on prep, you know, when you just can't walk and like your feet are like falling from running. And I was wearing these shoes, and one day I wore runners, and oh my God, the things I got said to me that day, because I just couldn't wear boots. Do you know the kind of way I was like, I'm actually going to fall over.
Yeah.
Do you find, obviously, with I suppose that element of things, do you use up your annual leave days more on a prep?
I have done in the past when I was so my first couple of preps, I used to commute to London. So I was up at 4 a.m. to go to the gym, do my hour of Stairmaster, eat some cold eggs, jump on the train from the station, walk to my office, which was about 15 minutes, do the day, and then in reverse, get back, train straight from there. And I was getting in at about 9:30 at night, literally eat a meal and go to bed. So that was hard. But and I did take a few holiday days there when I was just pure exhausted. But now, honestly, it's a dream working from home.
Yeah, that's the difference, isn't it? Yeah.
Dream. It makes all of those little things so much easier. Like, there's no half an hour travel to anywhere or an hour. There's no worrying about having to get washed and dressed. Like, you jump in the shower, you put your hair in a bun, you chuck a tracksuit on, and you're good. It doesn't matter. You've saved so much time.
Yeah,
because you're not having to travel to anywhere and put nice clothes on and sit there in those tights that are digging into your stomach, and your ass is hurting because it's lean and you're sitting on an uncomfortable desk chair, and all those sorts of little things.
Yeah. It is difficult. And like, Jade, I suppose you've been in the situation before. Maybe what I struggle with, I suppose, was seeing so many people. I think it's easier when it's just like your online coach, you're doing a couple of check-ins, but when you're like, you have to be awake for people. Do you know, if you're like a nurse or a teacher, like, you have no choice but to bring the energy. And same with you, Jade, as well. Like, I know you have quite a demanding job in that sense.
It's
people.
taxing. Yeah, like you say, that those conversations, the ones that you have by choice at that time, because like, let's face it, you get to the back end of prep, you're in that hole. You don't want to expel energy to do anything, like even conversations with your loved ones, like conversations with your friends, catching up. I was going weeks without catching it up with some of my friends. And so having those conversations, and especially the difficult ones, because I'm still in a public facing sort of role, and I was in a public facing role like when I was prepping. So having those conversations and trying to keep you cool when somebody's screaming their head off down the phone to you and stuff like that. But I think, like you said, the more you do it, and you both demonstrated it as well, the more you do it, the more you practice those skill set, and the more self-aware you are as well, because at the end of the day, you are doing it to yourself. Nobody else is forcing your hand. They're not taking food away from you and saying you have to live like this. This is a choice. And I think the more you embrace that, the more you accept that this is a decision you entered into. And yes, it's tough. Nobody's taking that away. But you made that decision. It's up to you to see it through as well. Because, like, I mean, God forbid you pull out of a prep because it gets too tough. Like, you're not. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, if it gets to the point where it's taken away from your happiness and your quality of life to the degree where you can't physically finish it, pull out. Hate to say it, but it has to be done.
And I'm going to say, unless I was going to lose my job,
it's a no.
Yeah, into the end.
Yeah. I've had so many times I've been that close, but it's almost just where you're at with the food focus, the tiredness, and like the thoughts have come in like twice on last press and twice on the one previous, where it's like, I think I might give up. But you don't. You just don't, because you're like, I actually couldn't do that to myself. I just kept thinking, like what you said, and it's like thinking of how you're going to feel. I was like, if I make that decision, I am going to feel worse than if I just carried on with this prep. And sometimes just suffering for a couple of more weeks, even you're like 3 weeks out, that's grand, you know, for 3 years of regret and guilt and just being like, I can't believe I did that. You know, I feel like you let yourself down if you make that decision. Obviously, like you said, if something dead serious, it's like, okay, no, I have to. But if you're going through it and it's like, oh, I'm a bit hungry, like, come on, are you actually going to get that far to then just give up? You know,
I think you've got to weigh it. And most of us, let's face it, most of us who are in this sport and are in it for the right reasons, and I'm going to be really distinctive about who I'm talking about, people who know what they're buying into will dig in, because that is what they're there to do. They made that choice because that time was going to come. That challenge was going to come, and that's what you're doing it for. You wanted to dig in where you didn't realize you could dig, and you keep going. Going to be a little bit controversial. There's people that enter into this sport without that foresight, and that's okay. Do you know what I mean? If you get into it and you get so far down the line and you just think, no, I don't have it. I don't have the shovel. I don't want the shovel. Don't want anything to do with it anymore. I'm not digging. Leave me alone. And I think it's having that capability and having that responsibility to have that conversation with yourself and be pragmatic about it. Look at the circumstances and think, are you going to be absolutely horrified if you pull yourself away from this? Are you going to regret every single decision after that, or the fact that you've stepped away? Or is it actually going to make you feel better because what you're doing right now is not something that you wanted? It's not something that, like, long term, not something that you actually, I'm here for the right reasons. There was something else. I thought it was going to give me something. Thought it was going to fulfill some want or need. Actually, it's not going to do that. I think those conversations, especially around first timers, should be had more frequently.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the two categories, right? It's the two cohorts of people. If you are a first timer, there is absolutely no shame in pulling out. It's new to you. You're still learning. Like, you'll make shit decisions because of all of the things we've just talked about. And I think if you're looking at life and you're going, well, this is impacting my friendships, my family, my relationship, this is impacting my job, then if you can't pull that back in, then you need to take a step back, because prepping is a luxury. If you are like us, years down the line, and you've been doing this a while, it's take a lot for you to not do that. But that's when I say, like, prepping my job, and my family understand that if I don't see them or speak to them for a few days, they get it. It's because I'm not in a great place. And instead of saying, well, where have you been? They're like, are you okay? But the thing that I tell myself in a on those bad days, Grace, like you were saying, like, I'm really hungry, I'm really tired, the food focus is bad. I tell myself by the time I get to the end of that day and I go to bed, I'm like, you nailed that. You nailed that day. And guess what? Tomorrow literally can't be any worse than that. So you've done it. You're going to go to sleep now and you've done it. And the worst thing that's going to happen from there is you don't sleep, because prep's a bitch like that. But yeah, like the fact that you can wake up in the morning and go, wow, a sense of achievement. I actually got through that really, really hard day. So if I can get through that, I'm golden, you know?
Yeah.
That's when your support network comes in, right? And I think that is potentially the most challenging part of that first prep, because as much as you're trying to find your feet with this and trying to navigate it and trying to understand whether it is something that you bought into, something that you're expecting is probably the wrong word, something that you were prepared for eventually, whether you know those feelings or not at the time is irrespective, unless you're getting into it for the reasons and with your eyes wide open. But not having that support network, because I mean, my parents are incredible, but I remember sitting on the sofa once and my dad was like, I'm really, really proud of you, but I kind of wish you'd been out dating instead of spending so much time in the gym and getting really lean. I was like, thanks, Dad. But I'm dead lean. I mean, he was really proud. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
He's the proudest parent in the entire world. But I vividly remember it, and I thought, oh my God, like my dad's thinking grandbabies, and I'm like losing body fat and losing my bodily functions by the day.
Yeah.
And it's getting, I think at that point, whether you really want it, because irrespective of feedback like that, you're like, yeah, but I can do this. I can do this, and I want to do it.
You've got to have a little bit of that personality trait as well, right? That you've got to have that tunnel vision, stubbornness, self-belief. Because if you're waning in any of those, then you probably won't make it.
No.
To be brutally honest, you've got to have that. This isn't about what anyone else thinks of me. This isn't about what anyone else wants for me. This is my time. It's 20 weeks or whatever it may be. This is what's happening. And explain to them, like, give them that deadline. Like I said to my family, I was like, I'll be yours again in like August. I promise. And we can do the holidays, we can do the dinners. I promise I'll make it up for the birthdays that I've lost and the Father's Days and the Mother's Days. I promise I'll make it up to you. But for now, this is what I need to do. And they get it. But it's that conversation, it's the transparency, right?
Yeah. I do understand that. I think I always say as well, what seldom is wonderful. And I even get that with like going out for meals. Like I wouldn't get the enjoyment. I think that's a good thing about prep, is like I wouldn't get the same enjoyment if I was just going out eating like 4 or 5 times a week, going out drinking every weekend. It's like, because I might do it, once or twice in the off season, like I enjoy it a lot more. And I appreciate the time with my family so much more than when I get to, eat with them and I get to go home or whatever. You just value that time with them so much more. But I think when it comes to the dark side of kind of prepping as well, and I know you're quite open about it on the podcast and stuff, but like hormones is such a big thing that we talk about. And I think obviously, just referring back to podcasts, people should go listen if they don't already. But have you found that to be an extremely challenging, I suppose, part and like dark side of prepping? And I suppose like Jade and I, when we first got into it, we didn't really know all that much. There wasn't the information out there. But do you feel like you're kind of coming out the other end now when it comes to that knowledge and I suppose experience with everything and what to do?
Yeah, so the reason that Mads and I wanted to talk about female health on the podcast was because we wanted people to avoid the mistakes that we'd made. And I don't think our health was directly as a result of prepping. However, as we know, or if people don't know, they're listening to this, you are putting your body at a disadvantage hormonally by being in a prep. So I always refer to your cycle as a luxury item. It's going to be the first thing to go. That's why we see things like hair, skin, nails, and periods all suffering. It's the way it is. And the reason for that being that if you were a caveman and you didn't have the food that you needed, you're not supposed to reproduce at that point because you're just trying to keep yourself alive. So there's that kind of thing to consider. Now, for those that don't know, I am, let's put it as hormonally challenged.
I like it.
A nice way to put it.
Yeah.
And I was on the pill for 12 years. And I think this is something I hear a lot, like girls in prep, something I definitely heard when I first started. And now I'm still hearing, and it scares me a little bit when they're on the pill or they're on an injection or an implant and they're going, I'm 2 weeks out and I've still got my period. No, you don't. Like, you have a withdrawal bleed because of the hormonal contraception you're on. And I'm trying to break that. And that's really important to me, that people understand that if you're going to prep, chances are that you will lose your cycle, and it will take a long time to get back. It's not going to return in a few weeks post-show. Like, it will for some, but it could be up to 9 months. It could be a couple of years. I came off the pill. I prepped. I took a long off season, and now I'm prepping again, and I don't have a cycle. I have been through many a test, and yeah, that's just not possible for me. And I've had mixed feedback from doctors and different specialists and things like that. But essentially, something you have to understand if you're going to come into this sport is that there is a very real possibility that you will damage your body beyond repair. And you could be in my boat then, and someone may say to you one day that children aren't something that you're going to be able to have. Like, that's something you need to understand. And I think a lot of young women that come into this sport go, I don't even want kids. Kids are disgusting. Oh, I did cry and shit and all that. Okay, right. You're 21, you're 18, like, you're not fussed about kids right now. But the things that people need to think about, stuff that I have to think about now, is dating becomes a lot more difficult. Because not only are you this weird bodybuilder that preps and does all this, and you're trying to explain that to people, but then you say to them, if you want children, then just so you know, I can't have them. And that will pretty much shut down that conversation immediately. So I think there's something that is being talked about at the moment, which I think is a really important topic, is longevity. And I know it's something you two have spoken about a lot on this podcast. You spoke about longevity with Josh McHale on the most recent episode. But people really need to think, when they come into this, is this something you want to do once for the experience? Or is this something you want to do long term? And if it's something you want to do long term, you can't throw everything at it straight away. And you need a coach that actually understands. You need someone that's going to put your health first, because I don't want anyone to end up in my situation, because it's rubbish.
It sucks.
It is.
And I think it's important to note on that as well, whilst we're talking about things going that way, it doesn't have to necessarily be because you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are putting your body under extreme amounts of stress, physiological stress. Your reproductive. I'm really fortunate. So I'm firmly like on the fence that I'm a bit of an anomaly. I did my most recent prep. I've been the leanest I've ever been. I had 4 weeks pre-show, missed 4 weeks post-show, like clockwork. Oh. I'm fortunate. That is nothing but luck, fortune, gratitude, the whole thing. But I think it's important to note that just because you're doing things the way you should, with the guidance of a coach, these things can still happen to you. So even if you think, oh, it's okay, I've got this coach and he's fantastic and he's really, really good and he's going to take care of me. Yes, he is. 100%. Oh, yes, she is. But it could still happen to you anyway, because that is the nature, and it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so your ability to tolerate stress as well, like Jade, you might have just been able to tolerate it really well, and the next person, would just it would be gone at just like starting a prep. Like, it's you'd never know. And same with it returning. And I think it's so crucial that, like, you can't say that, like when coaches say that this X is 2 weeks out and still has their period, like, that's great. It's nothing to do with you coaching them. It's just their ability to manage stress. And ultimately it's like, as well, using your off seasons as an opportunity to regain that, and that's what we like really, really hone in on. And not prepping, so frequently, and making sure that you're getting your blood work and all that thing is absolutely crucial. But in terms of like the physiological element is tough, and I'd like to think that Ross is doing a great job at helping you with that. And you know, I think in your case, Hannah, like, I wouldn't never say never. I think like you never know what another off season might bring. But in terms of like the psychological element of it, with like body dysmorphia and all that kind of thing on a prep, how do you manage that? Because we spoke about it in DMs the other day, but I've been through it. Last year was my worst for it. So when I saw you put up that story, I was like, and you responded, I was like, no, you're not getting it at that point, Hannah. But like, it's a really, really tough part of it, and that contributes to the stress element of it, really. Do you know? But how do you manage the mental side of things with comparison? You said even like seeing people up on stage. Do you compare to many people you're competing with, or what?
I try not to, but social media is in your face all the time, isn't it? Something that I actually do, which works really well, is I don't tell anyone my show date, and then I don't look to see who else is competing around the same time as me. As soon as I see a post when someone says like X weeks out, I'm like, scroll, go away. I don't want to know. Unless you're tall, I don't want to know. But yeah,
gracious safe.
Yeah. I'm like, are you A? Because I don't want to know. But yeah, I think if you can avoid seeing people, try not to, you want to have the camaraderie, but try not to get into that cycle of telling everyone when your show is, because if you have to drop out for any reason, or you want to move it, then you've got, that's not going to hang over your head. Like, people aren't going to be saying to you, oh, I thought you were doing the June whatever, or I thought you were doing the True Athlete, or, you know, like, you're not going to know. I am a nervous wreck backstage. I'm horrible. Like, don't talk to anyone. I just get in my own shell, because if I do, I'll be looking at them and I'll be thinking, oh, you've lost this already. Well done. So it's really, really tough. Especially in our little world as well. Like, everyone posts everything, and no one holds back from showing you their lines and the bikini bend and everything else like that. Everyone's tie-in. And for me, I actually don't enjoy being lean. I think it looks pretty horrible. I feel really small as well. And that kind of comes back to what I said earlier on. Like, I don't want to be weak. I want to be strong. I love this sport because I love training. I love someone telling me, God, you're wham. And I'm like, I know, I am.
Yeah,
But when you're a few weeks out, like, you don't look wham, you just look small and ill, and you're having to try and convince people that you do actually train. So yeah, I don't know if I would say I have body dysmorphia, but I refer to myself as small all the time, and I'm regularly being told I'm not small, and I don't know if people are just lying to me to try and make me feel better. But yeah, it's definitely a case of I'm not too positive about my own physique, so I try not to look at other people, because otherwise I'll just, like, you can't change it, so you can worry about something you can't change, and nothing's going to be achieved. You're just going to get stressed, and you're not going to want to do the show, and you're not going to want to go up against people.
Yeah. Do you find that it's gotten easier over the years, like managing the mental side of things and what you're seeing, or tougher now, I suppose, because you have such bigger goals? Would you say your goals are big this year?
No, I wouldn't. I would say that they're big enough for me. All I ever want to do is do better than I did before. So I would like to win my class. If I can win my class, honestly, you'd think that I'd turned like pro, got an invite to the Olympia, and came top 5. Like, I'll be over the moon with just winning my class, because the most I've ever done, well, I won a novice class in IFBB, but like, I'm like 3rd and 2nds. So if I won, I'd be like, whoa, that is mad. And if I could be competitive in an overall, it'd be insane. But I think this is where people go wrong. They set themselves like these massive goals, and it's like, just enjoy the process. Just do a little bit better than you did last time. Because if you set your goal as like all the way up here and you don't reach that, you're only going to see yourself as disappointed. I've seen people win their class and come second in an overall and walk off. Grace, I've seen you walk off stage, and it's heartbreaking. Like, actually goosebumps. It is heartbreaking to see someone so upset about something which is incredible. Like, because people wanted so much more, like you wanted so much more. And when it didn't happen, it was heartbreaking to see you so hard on yourself. And I was standing there like, if I had achieved what you had achieved, I'd be like blown away, you know?
Yeah. I think it was more the luck. I just was never satisfied. And I think the placings then just kind of confirmed it. Do you know that kind of way? I was just like, oh, I knew that wasn't a very good package. Do you know? And I think maybe if I was getting first, I would think differently. But I think it was the luck that I was like, every time I was getting second, third, I was like, yeah, that just proves to me everything that I thought the last few weeks when I was having, like, I had really bad body dysmorphia on prep last year. And I remember it was just before I went to Texas. So perfect timing. But like, it was from then onwards, I just started thinking so negatively. And I think then when I got the placings, it just confirmed that. But if I was so happy with the luck all through prep and I got those placings, I'd be like, brilliant. Like, do you know, second and third? But because I was coming second, third, I was like, oh yeah, I knew I looked shit. And then that just fed into the next show as well. But it is experience at the end of the day. I know. I look back and I look back and I say it to Ross all the time. I like cry for that grace. I have videos of me standing outside the stage in Italy. Bear in mind, Italy was beautiful. Rome, sun was shining, incredible. And Ross recorded a video of me from my YouTube, and I've like tears, like, you know, when you're crying, you're like trying to hold it in. You've got that like lump in your throat. And Cal was obviously there, and I was really trying to hold it in for him and show that I was strong. But I was just like, I had traveled all the way. And I think it as well, when you travel, I had just expectations, and then that didn't happen. And it was just such a big trip. And with Norway, it was so expensive.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it all just hits you. It doesn't it? And I remember saying to you, Hannah, when it came to the placings, I started questioning my entire off season. And I was just like, I know that's not the way to do it. And I'm working with a therapist to try and manage those thoughts. But I'm like, I just kept thinking negatively about the off season. It wasn't even the prep. I was like, I did this wrong, did this wrong, did this wrong. Do you know? You question everything.
We were sitting having something to eat post show, and you're sitting there going, right, so I think this is what I need to do with my training. And I remember turning around to you and going, would you just eat your burger and take 12 hours? Take 12 hours. You're out with Ross. We're out for something to eat. We'll just enjoy our surroundings. You talking about your training and thinking about that right now is not going to make any difference whether you do it now or you do it in the morning. But after giving so much time to a prep and being so selfish, not you specifically, but it's a selfish thing, you just need to give that time back.
Yeah. But
and to yourself.
To show like the different mindsets that athletes can have, do you know? And for some of us, like pressure is a privilege. For me, pressure just destroyed me. Do you know? And everyone is different. And I didn't use that to kind of pick me up, but I just like, it would just tear me down, and not coming first was just the worst thing in the world. But like I said, there are things that you take into the next prep, and I will not take anything for granted again. The luck, the process, the placings, whatever it is, do you know? But sometimes you need that prep. And I think it reminded me of when you had touched on your post show there, Hannah, that you just felt like it was a disaster. And like, I think of that prep last year as that, and it's like, you only learn from it. You know, you only just take that with you in the next one. You say, right, I'm not going to do that again. I feel like everybody might have that prep where it's just like a turning point in what they do and how they approach things and how they think, you know, and that was definitely last year for me. And I haven't said it before, but I think back last year, and I said it to Ross the other day, and I kind of regret like competing last year. But at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm glad I did, because it's given me everything that I need now going into the next one, if I ever do.
As cheesy as it is, like, I genuinely don't think that anyone should ever regret anything, because you wouldn't be where you are now thinking how you think and doing what you're doing if you hadn't have gone through that. No matter how terrible something is, like, everything does happen for a reason.
Yeah. And I'm on the flip side to you, Grace, whereas you were that disappointed in a package that honestly I would killed for.
Yeah.
Quite literally. Like my year before my recent year, so like last year was my most recent prep. The year before that was a road, like it's car wreck, absolute car wreck. I got on stage and I wasn't in condition, not even close. Not even close. And that for me, on the flip side, but did exactly the same thing. I remember getting off stage and I couldn't stop crying. I was sending my coach voice notes, apologizing, pouring my heart out, saying I've let you down, let the team down. Half the team I didn't even know. Personally, I couldn't have had a conversation with them, but I let them down and I let myself down. I let my family down. They were all rooting for me. Everybody was telling me that I was going to do great. And I turned up and I absolutely shit the bed. And I think those are turning points. And as much as I wish I'd never stepped on stage that year, but then the following year, like hell was I going to do that again? And you take so much from it. And the placings or wherever you fare and whatever the feedback is, this sport will test you, no matter whether it's positive, negative, whether you're at the top, the bottom. Either way, it's always going to present a new challenge. And I think as long as you're taking that on board and really honing it into the next couple of steps or however many building blocks you're building on top of that, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
All you can do. But it was a road wreck. It's so bad.
I think the community aspect is great, and talking on these podcasts and talking to other athletes and me taking pieces of advice from you and how you think, and even Jasmine that we had on the podcast, how she was like feeling during a prep. I'm like, I actually need to take that with me, and hopefully we can get some more pros on here and see how their mindset around things. It's just constant learning and evolving, and your first couple of preps are not going to be that way. I didn't have any kind of friends in my first prep, nobody to talk to or to understand anything from. So it's great that we have this kind of community of people now. But I suppose we don't want to be rambling on too long, which we could talk for Ireland, as they say.
It's almost meal time for Hannah.
Oh, I wish.
How are you feeling about this prep in particular, Hannah, comparatively to your previous?
I am excited in some respects because I've done every single prep with a different coach. Like it was the same coach for 5.5 years. And now being with Ross, it's like everything's different. And prep is going better than it's ever gone. So that aspect I'm excited for. I am excited to see what I've built, but I'm also apprehensive. After having such a long time off, it's exciting to think that I'll bring something new, because doing prep after prep after prep and having arguably, you could call it an off season, a few months in a surplus. I've never really brought anything wildly different. So
it's just your longest off season.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a little bit nervous about that. The expectation. I think there's always people that go like, oh, so-and-so's had a load of time off. Like people keep messaging me like, I know they're meaning it in a really lovely way. Like they're excited. And I'm like, okay. So yeah, there's a little bit of that. I am a little bit nervous because I don't want to let anyone down, like you say, Jade. Like I don't want to come to Ross and then people expect something that I'm not physically able to bring. But I'm excited. At the moment, it's getting to that point where I feel a little bit ropey. So it means that the shreds are soon cometh.
They absolutely are. I was looking at your photos, and just 2 weeks looks like it's been 12 weeks in my eyes. I'm like, what?
Mad.
Like, where did this come from? It must have been all the two-stepping you did.
Print works.
That's the key, is it? To get shredded.
Print works.
Wow.
Yeah, the next day I was a kilo down. I think it was 1.1. But good old prep weight's come back on today, hasn't it? So
mad. I don't know how you did that. My recovery would be in the bin for 2 weeks. If I went to Ed Sheeran actually when I was 12 weeks out, and the next day, 2 days, I felt hungover.
Yeah,
and I was just standing up dancing.
Yeah,
I don't know how you did it.
46, and I think it was 46,500 steps. It equated to 28 kilometers. and my heart rate was over 120 for 9 hours.
Oh my God.
I think Ross
So-
told me that you didn't have
Oh my
cardio or something the next day. I was like,
No. Yeah, he was like, he was like, no cardio for you. And I laughed. He was like, I'm serious. And I was like, okay.
I was going to say a day a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
nuts.
lot. I like you say, Grace, I have felt wrecked for a few days. I'd go to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock every night, just trying to catch up on sleep.
You need to, though, don't you? You
Yeah.
need your beauty sleep, especially at this stage. How many weeks out are you now?
I don't.
Oh wait, no, I didn't want to
Oh,
say.
no.
I was just thinking. I was like, maybe for context for the listener, the person who asked the question, but you're far enough out that you don't feel too awful, but you're getting the faces coming in. So
I'm about halfway through.
yeah.
Yeah. So like in a prep sense, halfway through, you've pretty much taken half of the weight off. So like I referred to earlier on, I'm small, but I'm not lean. So you're going to feel fine really for the first chunk of weight that's coming off, because that was just fat. And now it's just that last bit. That's when you're going to start feeling rough. And by rough, I mean, like, I feel like my face, I can feel it under my eyes. You're physically quite tired. Like, it's just quite a lot, like on the Stairmaster, quite lifting your legs. It's just, they feel heavy a lot of the time. And in bikini, we train legs a lot. Sleep is still golden, thank God. But yeah, like you just feel a little bit run down. I can't explain it to like family and friends, like, you know, and you feel like you're going to get ill. That run down feeling before, I'm like, you're just going to feel like that indefinitely now. So
yeah, but you still got some carbs. You're not in the hole just yet. We await that. That's when it gets exciting.
Yeah, he took some today.
Damn it, Ross.
Thief.
Could have left in for the podcast.
No.
Just as well we got you on now. I think when somebody asked that, I was like, well, you'd be lucky to try and get somebody who's a couple of weeks out trying to speak. So no, it was really, really good to chat, Hannah. But you're not an online coach, but you do share a lot on Instagram. So where can people find you? And we'll of course link your podcast, etc.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so on Instagram it's at Hannah Wares, Wares. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions like off the back of this around prepping, what it feels like, or if anyone's just feeling a bit lonely, we talked about how we didn't really have a lot of people around us in our first prep, and that if that's you and you're listening and you just want someone to talk to, if you want to know something's normal, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to reply anytime.
Absolutely. The YouTube comments always go off, so if anybody's got anything that they want to share, experiences and stuff, I'm sure we'll get back to them. But thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you,
let you
Hannah.
go, get your beauty sleep, and we'll speak soon.
All right, thanks guys.
See ya.